Welcome, everyone, to another DesignOps Aligned podcast. And today's guest needs no introduction from me. She is very well known in our industry. Even people write job descriptions to say, are you going to be the new Kate Towsey? Yeah. You see how
I know, what a legend. One of my relatives came across it, and a friend of mine who's like she's a singer, she's a jazz singer,
Yeah.
completely disconnected from the world of research ops. She sent it to me.
Wow. You're like a rock star in our industry.
I reckon I've hit legend status based on that
Yes.
one factor.
I definitely, when I saw that posted up on LinkedIn, I just knew that today's show is going to be brilliant. We thank you for taking the time to speak to us because, as it speaks for itself, you are very well known in the industry. I can imagine your diary is completely packed. So to give us some time today to speak on today's podcast means a lot to us. So welcome, Kate. Welcome
Thank
to the
you. It's
Design of Design
really
podcast.
amazing to be here, and so cool to be on a design podcast too. For me,
Yeah.
that's really, really cool.
Well, today is going to be a very, very interesting show because I think my business partner does a lot of research ops within DesignOps Aligned,
Mhm.
and I think this is where I'm going to be really delving into. So it'll be not on the design aspect, but I think it'll
Yeah.
be really, really understanding what research ops is going to bring into the industries.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I have my pen and my notepad ready to make notes so that I stay on point and don't go
Okay.
wandering down some rabbit hole.
Kate, do you want to give an introduction to the small amount of people who might not know you listening to this podcast?
Well, thank you. I'm sure there are plenty out there. I don't have that much of an ego. My name's Kate Towsey, as you've said, and I have been really working very deeply in the field of research operations since about 2013, where I was actually a content strategist. I come from a script writing, creating fine art background, and had ended up in this world of content strategy, which was a really good fit for me. That's where I thought my home would be in the tech world. And then I came across researchers and I was asked, can I do some content strategy work with researchers to resolve this age-old problem of where do we find our research reports? How do we consolidate them? How do we communicate them out into the world so that they have impact? Problems that have not gone away in that time, but have definitely evolved and progressed. So I got stuck into that, and while I was realizing in this contract I was doing with the Government Digital Service in the UK, very quickly realizing that this was way above my skill set. This was really for a highly qualified research librarian or an information scientist, someone with real chops in the field. But when you're a consultant, you make yourself usefully busy. You don't say, I can't do, you get on with things, right? And I come from a music background, hence the audio production. You can probably see the drums and the various instruments in my background. I used to be a professional musician. Many don't know this in the goth and punk rock scene for years. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was asked at that point, would I be able to build a research lab for the team? And I thought, this is amazing. Like, I get to work with audio engineers and design a sound space and experience. Long story short, I got deep into building panels and building labs and building all sorts of things other than this library and all the content around it. But that's really kind of where I came across this notion of groups of researchers, large groups of researchers who need infrastructure to be able to do their best work. And so that's how I fell into research ops. And then the rest is a whole long story. But here I am, having written a book and started the research ops community, stepped away in 2019, started the Cha-Cha Club. You're thinking, how on earth does dancing and tango or cha-cha fit into this? But the Cha-Cha Club stands for Cheerleaders and Chums. And now, 6 years later, it's a members-only club for research ops professionals, because many of them are teams of one and they need a cheerleader and a chum. So it's a very, very vibrant Slack space and members-only meetings and productions and a bunch of stuff that keeps me very busy. In the world of research ops, on top of all of my consulting advisory, masterclasses and things like that.
Oh, that's introduction just shows that why you're well known in this space. And everyone, we will drop the links to everything that Kate just mentioned. Again, it is a members only club. So if you do come from a research ops background, please go to it. But if you don't, I would say stay away from it because, you know, it is a kind of subjugated group and it does make sense
Yeah,
that you do
you would keep it
keep it.
focused.
Yeah, exactly.
But for your audience, we do annual productions. This year, we are launching a Substack called the Research Ops Review. It's actually launching on the 1st of May. So potentially after this airs. Or before this airs. And that is going to be dedicated to research ops content, but relevant to designers, product managers, to loads of different people, researchers, marketeers. We'll get into this.
Oh,
And
wow.
then in July, I'm currently working on bringing back in my radio production skills that I used to have 20 years ago. And I'm creating an audio documentary on the future of research ops, 5-part series. So
Wow.
that's just in the midst of production. First episode drops in June. So lots and
Oh,
lots of goodness for people not in the club to enjoy.
oh, that's brilliant. We're going to drop all of those links, in the show notes and send it out when we post up this video. So we're looking forward to that. So
Amazing.
Okay, I'm going to go straight into this. And I think the reason why I wanted to bring you onto the show is not just because of your status, but I really wanted to have this conversation with you regarding research ops. And I want to get your take. I don't know if you know Meredith Black. She
Yeah.
started so head of design ops or started the design ops assembly. And her first question I asked her was, is design ops dying out? And I want to start off this podcast to ask you, do you think research ops is slowly dying out due to the fact that a lot of companies are now started to make a lot of cuts, and especially in the research field where I've seen a lot of hits happen? What's your take on this?
Yeah, you love to go in with a hard question start.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's an exciting question. One note, actually, Meredith wrote a testimonial for my book, Research That Scales. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
we know each other. I love her work. So to your question, is there a death knell for research ops, or is research ops struggling in the same way as design ops or
Yeah, no,
design
sure.
or research and so many other parts of the tech industry and beyond? No. Yes, there are layoffs. It's a very South African thing to say no and then yes straight afterwards, by the way. There are certainly layoffs. I'm not going to lie to you and say that people are just cruising through and what are you all talking about? There are certainly layoffs and there's shrinkage in teams and there is definitely shrinkage in budget. But what I'm seeing more and more is that companies are convinced that they need research. No one is questioning that research is necessary. They're not that convinced at the moment, from what I can see, in all cases, that they need researchers to do research. And I think this is an extension of the so-called democratization of research, in which people are supported or unsupported, doesn't really matter. Lots of different people who do research is a term I came up with a few years, or 5 years ago now, I think. Some people call it powder, PWDR. And this can be researchers doing research, but also designers, product managers, engineers, marketeers, lots of different people getting involved in various altitudes of research, from like really simple chats with a customer, or even desk research for that matter, let's not forget.
Yeah.
Googling Gartner, whoever, wherever you want to find your research, your external research reports, all the way up to behavioral science level type of research.
Yeah.
So what is happening is that I'm just going to recap. Companies are convinced they need research. No question there for most companies. Not as convinced that they have the ability to or can afford researchers to do research, or that they need researchers to do research. However, there's a gap, because if you want lots of people in your organization to be doing research, you need operations. And so what I am seeing, in fact, is that research operations is growing in many places, not always behind research, sometimes
Okay.
behind design, oftentimes behind PMs. And I've heard several cases now in the last 6 months of people being hired into lead research operations where there is not a researcher or a head of research in sight.
Okay.
Nowhere. And what they're being asked to do is they're being asked to set up a fully democratized. The word democratization doesn't exist in that context because there's no one to democratize. Everybody does research. And so they're being brought in and told to set up, how do we recruit? How do we train ourselves? How do we do a great job of research without the researchers and the head of research around?
Hmm.
It's I've heard about it enough times now to even be so bold as to say it's a trend.
Okay. But then,
Interesting, right?
but it's an interesting take. I mean, but from your perspective, once you start to democratize that skill, don't you think that a lot of the data that's going to be found won't be as good as a researcher would find? Because it's like asking developers and product managers who do this to do a mock-up, and it's not as great quality as a designer would. So
Hmm.
do you think that companies will start going down the route of, okay, we're going to democratize it, and then we're going to find out that the data quality that we're actually getting is really not what at a standard which is really going to help them? What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah. I think that there are several altitudes of research, and there is very low risk research that we could train up anyone to do. There is also just, I want to research, I want to be close to my customers, I want to just get a general empathetic understanding of who they are so I don't feel disconnected, like continuous discovery type of research that can happen. And then you'll go kind of up the steps through the altitudes of really quite scientific, serious research that is tied to billion-dollar decisions, right?
Yeah.
And I think of it as, I was saying to someone this morning, actually, which is when I made up this analogy in this conversation. When you think of altitudes, you can get like someone in their dinky, like with their little remote controlled airplane, just flying
Hmm.
around in circles at a certain altitude, which is a very different risk factor and expense to going to a single prop personal, pilot licensed plane, someone
Hmm.
flying at that level, to now a jumbo jet or, Boeing or Airbus or whatever flying at that level with hundreds of people on board, to like a fighter jet, an F-19 or whatever they are
Yeah.
right now, right? Or then all the way up to the International Space Station, right?
Wow.
And so research can be seen in that same way. There are these various altitudes of the need for, like, the fidelity is different, the risk is different, and so on and so forth. So I think what is needed is, I think researchers are absolutely needed in an organization, but they're needed
Hmm.
at the right altitude.
Yeah.
What we need is we need a research leader with a strategic systems design, culture design mindset, an operator
Hmm.
to come in, but they've got to have all that methodology knowledge in their brain to come in and say, these are the altitudes that we have within the organization. I'm going to give you all over there a model airplane to fly around, because that's all you really need to do in order to keep progressing in your work and moving forward. And we're going to handle these levels of research going on. And they need to design in partnership with operations. I don't think that operations can do this on their own, because, like, I have never run a research team. I'm not one to say that I know all the methodologies that should be implemented at this particular altitude and time.
Hmm.
So we need that person to structure this research strategy at these different levels. So there is a critically important place for research,
Hmm.
but it's for research leaders to decide what research happens when, by whom, and in what way.
Yeah.
Operations to implement that, put all the infrastructure in place and get the flywheels going at all the different altitudes.
Yeah.
And then the very incredible researchers with years of irreplaceable skills need to be working at the Boeing level, Airbus level, the fighter jet level, and then the International Space Station level.
Let me take the context with somebody who's in that international space station level. Would you say they're in that kind of C-suite
Yeah,
aspect? But you see,
absolutely.
this is where I always, because let me paint the picture. I believe researchers are the strongest piece. I always put this context. I think they're the strongest piece on the chessboard,
Hmm.
and I think what's happened in my experience is that they're positioned in a company in the most, I would say, not impactful way.
Yeah.
They're always seen as, oh, we're going to research something that we're doing on the UI. And most of the time, I've seen researchers positioned as a way of validating designs, not as continuous discovery
Hmm.
and feeding into a backlog.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's just my view and opinion. I personally think if you bring research to a strategic level on a C-suite, it has way more impact on so many different departments. Like you can research how the brand is doing. You can research, as you just mentioned, it's a democratization. A lot of people can do research, and you can see if you have a research position on a C level, the findings and the data you can get is going to enhance so many different aspects of the business.
Yeah.
Now, in your experience, have you seen any researchers be on that space station level?
Space station level. I have heard of some teams that are working towards that.
Hmm.
And I think there is a bunch of selling to do.
Hmm.
I want to say that over the last 15 years, research has done an extraordinary job of growing,
Hmm.
like amazing. I mean, in 2010, there was, a few researchers in like the odd company, and, you had places like Facebook/Meta or Google who were ahead of their time in building these really, really big teams. But by and large, there was no such thing as this kind of idea of teams of 20 or 100 or 200 researchers. That was unheard of. Research as a profession has done an outstanding job in this time, now to 2025, of
Hmm.
selling it into organizations and growing teams. And then 8-9 years ago now, research operations came in sort of more broadly. It existed 20 years ago, but it sort of became more well known through a lot of the work that I did with the research ops community. And that's matured incredibly over the last 8, 9, 10 years.
Hmm.
So there's been a huge amount of traction made. And I think sometimes researchers forget that what a journey, like pat yourself on the back, because that is
Yeah.
awesome. And yes, we've hit a bump in the road. Like it's not just us, like the world has hit a bump in the road,
Hmm. Yep.
and we're feeling the impact of that. And it's a fantastic place to now learn from where we've been and put things back together again. And to go back to your point, there's a place for us in organizations that didn't exist before. People are convinced that they need research. Now we need to elevate. We need
Yeah.
to be a rocket ship. We need to get to the International Space Station. And that might take as much work as it's taken to embed research into the psychology, into the psyche of
Hmm.
how companies are run. Like we're part of the nervous system now of organizations. That's
Yep.
awesome. Now it's just like, how do we get to the brain? You
It's
know?
a, it's a, it's a, it's such a big challenge because, and I'll play devil's advocate. It's one of the key things. I gotta have a balance when people come on the podcast, and I've spoken to a lot of product managers, um, and their 2 cents when I've spoken to them on why they don't use researchers has always been the same. I would say nine
Mm-hmm.
out of 10 times I hear the same answer, and the answer is I tend not to use the researchers due to the fact that they will go off for 3 months and come back with something. And by the time they've come back to something and they've done this big reveal, we've already moved 3 months
Yeah.
and we've already pushed that product to production. And they say to me, we tend to always use them to tick a box and go and validate our ideas and assumptions. Um, and do you think this what's happened with research, that we've also shot ourselves in the foot by being I would say, too much in using the methodology in some sense that doesn't help in a business context? So what
Mm-hmm.
I mean by that, we're not fast enough, we're not producing the results fast enough in order to make an impact to your product roadmap. What's your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Nothing that you're saying is sounds unusual to me. I've seen this countless times. I've heard about this countless times. Product managers who have a deep respect for the work that is the people doing the work,
Hmm.
but they're going like the timing is totally off. Like I was hungry 3 months ago,
Yeah.
and this is just of no use to me. And now you want me to sit and read like a 10-page report on something that's like
Hmm.
long gone. So that is it's something that I've seen a lot. Um, I guess this is the question about there's complications in here, and the reason this is why I hesitate on the question, because it can be to do with, I know many researchers be going, yes, but we don't get called in soon enough. There's
Yes.
not enough planning. If you called me in 3 months before, I would be delivering amazing insights, not only at the 3-month mark, but all the way through. That was involving you. Come and watch the user interviews, observe, take part, be part of the analysis. Research is a team sport, all that kind of stuff. So that when you got to your 3-month point where you were ready to launch, we were feeding you all the way through. So I can
Yes.
hear that side as much from the researchers as I can from very busy PMs who,
Hmm.
in my experience, would love to get involved in research, want to come and watch research, observe research sessions, want to do research themselves, but their schedule takes over and they just don't have the time. And so there's this
Hmm.
push and pull between we need the insights and we have the enthusiasm, but our calendars are just so stuffed full of things to do that we can't make the time for it. And so I don't have necessarily like a solution of how do we just iron that out
Hmm.
and fix that? Because my sense is that the paradigm has shifted. Like the way organizations are functioning now between product and design and research and AI coming in as a
Hmm.
teammate, not
Yeah.
as a tool, as like an active teammate, a whole new team in the organization. And if you
Hmm.
don't see AI that way, like good luck to you.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to be
Exactly.
behind the times. And so with the paradigm shift in terms of how teams are structured, how people are thinking, how things are happening, I think we need to rethink the product development life cycle and redesign how does research fit into that life cycle, not by, well, not only, I think this is at part, but not only by when does a researcher start to engage with product. These are things that people have been trying to figure out for like years now. But again, going back to the altitude levels and the systems that you design, who needs to do that research at that point so that the quick insights, the stuff that you need right now to make a decision that's happening tomorrow, are available to you? And then how do we bring in the deep insights, the stuff that takes the 3 months? Like, how do we get the moment that that idea starts to form somewhere before it even possibly reaches the CPO or the PM or whoever gets to, that's now on the research roadmap?
Let me take a stab at a different avenue. Do you think the reason why we're in this position of researchers not being positioned in a right way in a product roadmap is because we've had design leaders come up the chain, and we're still fighting the battle with design leaders in the sense with product and stuff like that. But in my experience, I have never seen research leaders. I've seen research managers. I mean, in the sense that they're managing a research team, or back in my day, it used to be an R&D department. But do you think that's what's missing? That you need that advocate of a research lead to speak on behalf of researchers? Because that's what design leaders are meant to do. We're meant to be advocating great principles on a design effort. And I've made this mistake myself. I advocate a lot for designers due to the fact of, they need to be brought in early. They don't want to be seen as a tool. They want to be seen as a partner. And so a lot of that focus and attention goes on them and less on the researcher from a design leader perspective. And that's just from my experience. Do you think that's reason why researchers are positioned where they are?
I have seen some really strong research leaders in organizations, and they have even struggled sometimes to really get the equal seat at the table. And so the idea of there being a product leader, a design leader, and a research leader all working together as a great like team, I
Yeah,
don't often see that. And I can't figure out why, because why
yeah,
not? Like,
yeah.
why would you not have this really tight, we have the triad of design, product, and engineering. We need a
Yes.
quad because research
Yeah.
should be there feeding everybody with the information they need to make the great decisions from product. Why do we build the thing? Like,
Mm-hmm.
even what are we going to build? Like what do our customers need to design? What does it look like? How does it function? To engineering, like the way we engineer it is going to adjust how it functions, and we need to research that that's actually done correctly at the end of the day. And
Mm-hmm.
so research should be involved in all those places. And in my journey, I mean, I haven't worked for every company in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but I just haven't seen that real teamwork at that level. And it
Yeah.
seems crazy because for me, that
It
seems
does.
very obvious.
Yeah, it does. And I love that you just mentioned that. I've never understood the product triage. It never made sense to me because
Yeah.
it's as you mentioned, you need the product quadruple.
Yeah.
You need the four, and I've heard people speak about the triage, and I'm like, that's really not going to work. because you do need that research aspect. And I think this is what's happened. Just from my opinion, I think the miseducation that research and design are the same thing has gone across the whole of our industry, well, the whole of the business
Yeah.
industry. They think design and research are, they could do exactly the same. You can get a designer doing research, you can get a UI designer doing research. It doesn't make sense. So do you think there's still that educational aspect in our industry that still needs to come to the forefront, that researchers are completely different to designers?
Yeah, yeah. I do think that. And I think that some of that is, I think researchers are needing, and I'm hearing several researchers who have been through the rough times going, oh, like we've really got to learn business language. We have to
Yeah.
start speaking like business people. I point this out in my book. Like you've got to be a business leader. You can't just be leading research. That's not a just. It's a big job, and it's a highly
Yeah.
skilled job. But we all have to, if we're leading a business unit, like research or like design or like product or name marketing, you name it, you have to be a business leader as well. You've got to be looking at where is your value in the organization. It doesn't have to be directly tied to profit like the sales department, but you do have to be delivering enough value into the organization that they don't question that you are worth the money being spent on you.
Yeah.
I was saying to someone earlier, it's like, YouTube. I don't pay for YouTube. But if someone said to me, we're going to take away YouTube unless you put in $10 next month, like I'd be like, oh, okay, like I'll do that. I don't know how much YouTube costs to run. I don't know anything about it. Sure, I don't pay for it. But this is a bit of a roundabout point. But it's so valuable to me. I go there when I want to learn about sound equipment or something. That's where I go and get my knowledge. I don't think about how much it costs to run. Like, I don't think about anything about YouTube other than the fact that I never want YouTube to go away because it's so valuable to me because I learn. Research needs to be like YouTube in an organization. Someone will be footing the bill for research and they'll go, wow, we spend $15 million a year. Not an unusual number, by the way, for a research team of 12, 20 people, whatever it is, including tools and all that sort of stuff. But it needs to be so invaluable, not because I don't understand how YouTube works. I just know that when I go there and I do a little bit of searching, I find some very cool videos of people, like maybe people watching now on YouTube, hopefully going, this is super cool, to learn something that I can then take away and it improves my life. So
it's such a hard one, Kate, because, this is something that we at DesignOps Aligned are always trying to help design leaders or just designers to translate design into a business language, or to translate your design impact into business language. That's a very, very hard thing in a design firm. But I would say it's much more easier than to translate research and the whole research ops into a business language and a business impact. Now, what would you say to people who might be listening to this podcast? And I can imagine a lot of people in the research background will be listening to this. What kind of context can you give to them to translate, their work into a business language, which is going to be receptive to product managers, C-suites, VPs? What would you say?
Yeah. The skill of a researcher is to be able to not just listen and find out what people are thinking by asking, but to observe and look at and go, okay, what kind of books do you have on your shelf? If I wanted to like impress you, maybe I would go it's observation. I'm going to look at your expressions and try and see when are you excited, when you're less excited. These are really incredible learned skills. It's like a tracker out in the wild who's learned how to see almost nothing and follow an animal through the bush. It's incredible. So it's exactly these skills that are needed within the organization to understand and go and ask, but also observe and test. When I put this out, what is the problem here? How do I respond? And so every organization's different. Every product manager is different. Every culture is different and therefore requires slightly different things. The pressures coming from C-suite are different. And so a product manager, their natural style might be amended because there's someone else around them needing something slightly different. Use the skills of research to go and find out How do
Yeah.
people think in this organization? How should I respond? Let's put out some content that does this and see. Let's A/B test it, right?
Yep.
You probably have all the tools sitting right under your hood to do all this stuff, and you certainly have all the skills. So that's like the number one thing. It's like hairdressers who have terrible hair. You know, all the skills are there to do this work. It's just turning it to like an internal understanding of the organization around you, understand the problems that are there, understand the opportunities that are there, and then the operation side of it is like build the structures, the systems, and the culture that fits tightly in with what you saw, and experiment and shift and change until you're operating. Like literally, you're verbing, you're operating, you're doing, you're existing, and you're giving, and you're taking too in terms of salary and other things.
Yeah.
You're in a way that is symbiotic with the organization.
I just done a webinar, so I'm going to do some product placement, Kate. I just done a webinar yesterday about this because we do this in DesignOps Aligned. So when we come in, we only come in for a certain amount of time, and so we're very, very short in how long we can spend there. And one of the key things we do is that we build internal stakeholders personas, and we use this book, Surrounded by Idiots. I don't know if you know it, to build a framework. Oh, a brilliant book. Absolutely brilliant book.
It's gonna go onto my book list.
Oh, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, you use the terminology surrounded by idiots, but it's actually personalities or people that you work with.
Yeah.
So when you're red, you like to be communicated in a certain way, blue, etc., etc. So we use that as our guiding principle to know how to communicate with these people, as well as how can we collaborate with them. And our research ops team use it thoroughly, like in the sense they know if this person is a certain color and they need to get the research team to do a readout. They know that at the end of the day, that person just wants the quick suggestions. They don't want to see all the data. And so it structures them in a way to communicate internally. And so we tell the teams that we work with to update these personas as much as possible, because it helps you in delivering and collaborating. And also, it's really good in bringing people to workshops, so you know how to pair them up together to get the best. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's
I was just going to say that your viewers and listeners might be thinking, wow, Naresh and Kate had like scripted that perfectly. It looked so natural.
Oh, no,
that you had the book right there. But
I just done the webinar yesterday.
It is totally legit. It is completely legit.
Just so everyone knows, like, me and Kate spoke about a month ago, and we said, like, we are going to have no scripts,
no discussion guide, nothing.
No discussion guide. We had no topics. We are just going to freestyle, and that's why today is a natural conversation. So
enjoying the content? Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram for more updates. Your support helps us bring you even more great content. Now let's get back to our podcast.
Kate, I want to take a stab at something else. I think what's happening now, and as you mentioned it just a second ago, like with the influx of AI coming in, not as a tool, but as a strategic partner or a member of a team.
Yeah.
And that's happened so fast. Like, you took us a long time to be considered as a member of a unit. But with the introduction of AI coming in as a member of a team, do you think now research is going to be much more optimized in its delivery and its way of collaborating with product managers?
I'm gonna answer your question in a bit of a roundabout way, but bear with me.
Go for it.
So, I mentioned earlier, and maybe this is in your bloopers or not, but I'm producing an audio document. Actually, I think I mentioned it in my introduction, so we're safe. I'm producing this audio documentary at the moment, and I've dabbled with AI. I've had what I realize now is a pretty limited view of what it is. And so in the last 5 days, I thought, well, maybe actually, I started with ChatGPT. Maybe actually ChatGPT can help me script these 5 episodes, right? maybe I won't go and do all the coding and the scripting myself. So I thought, I wonder how that would work. And I thought, well, I could just ask ChatGPT how it would help me. And so I did. And it gave me a very amazing, eloquent answer about how it would do this. It would set up file structures. It told me, go and set up this exact file structure in Google, and I will just populate all of your content into these files in Google.
Okay.
I was like this. I said to my audio engineer, this is amazing. Like, imagine I arrive on Monday morning and my whole script is just there and I'll have to check through it. But what a world that would be. It completely did not work out that way. I spent 5 days chatting with my bot and trying to train it up and haranguing with it and realizing that it is psychotic. Like, it says it can do all these things. And then when I point out that actually it can't do that, it goes, oh, yeah, you're right. I completely can't do that. But it promised to do it like 4 hours ago.
Yeah.
It's got, but with marketing and like making marketing, it's amazing. What I did then was I moved across various AIs. I went to DeepSeek, I went to Claude, I went to and I tried the same thing just to get a sense of like how like on point and honest are these intelligences. The reason I start with that story is what I realized in doing this was that when we think of AI as a tool that we're going to implement at certain points in the journey of research, I think we're missing the point. It is actually an intelligence. And which is, I mean, maybe people are listening to this and going like, duh, Kate, we figured this out ages ago. Like, you're telling us something that we knew already. But it's an intelligence that has certain types of intelligence about it, but like some of us are more emotionally intelligent or visually intelligent, like in the case of designers, or business and metrics or numbers intelligent. My experience is that the different AIs have different intelligences depending on how they implement and things like that.
Yeah.
But if we look at it as an added teammate into the team, then suddenly how we implement it or think about it becomes completely different. So it's more of instead of it being a tool at various points, it's something that can be diffusive across the research workflow.
Okay.
So I look at it and I think people are like, oh my God, synthetic users, terrible idea. You know, the idea that you might have like fake AI users. Whereas I actually think, well, it's another type of tool. Horrifying to me that might be used as the only type of research for sure. But if we go back to the analogy of like a model airplane level altitude of research, like very basic level research, imagine a world in which we would do, it's just pausing because my husband's taking the bins out, which is right outside my window. I'm like,
totally fine.
what is he doing?
I'm keeping that bit in, Kate. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So back to it. So when you've got really basic level research, maybe I'm open to the idea that maybe you would use synthetic users, not just any old synthetic user, but one that is really trained towards particular customers, right? It could be that you have very high value customers that you do not want to tap them on the shoulder to do research with them very often. What would it look like if you were to create a highly custom synthetic user that you can go in and do some basic testing with, very low risk? I mean, it's almost for free. You might even get a well-trained AI moderator to go and do the research with them, get some insights out of them. And I'm not saying we're ready for this right now, but I'm saying we could be in like a year's time, maybe 2 years' time. And then the insights out of that, you might go like, actually, I've learned some pretty cool things out of this. And I think could now... Suddenly my interviews with these very high value individuals are going to be more thought out, more primed than they would have been for free, right? But because you're using the intelligence, you're not kind of going, oh, that's a tool that I think it's evil. And so it's looking at like, where can we use extra help? Another example that I think is a massive missed opportunity. Anyone who wants to have a startup, this is a great idea. And I've run this with a few researchers and ops people, and they've gone like, yeah, why is no one building this? This is like, I've got you on the edge of your seat, right, Naresh? Like, what is the idea? So,
you got me on the edge because we've been looking at the website synthetic users, and you know we've dibbled and dabbled with it. And my theory, or what the team has really kind of taken back, is that it's close. It's really close to what you want. Now, if if companies, and imagine a, a research team does so much with actual real users,
Yeah.
but how much of that is really influenced into a backlog is kind of like, it's not proportional. You do so much of this stuff, and the learnings, how much of the learnings really feed back into a product roadmap? Probably, I
And the
would say,
speed thing.
and the speed, yeah,
Yeah.
and the speed thing. So it then comes down to, well, if you can build a synthetic user and get near enough, I would say 80% close to a real user, why not bring this in and say, hey, we've tested this out. This is our findings. This is how quick we can deliver it to you. And those findings can be dribbled and drabbled into a product roadmap. And even though the synthetic user is 80% close to what the actual user is, you can see where the advantage is. And as you mentioned,
Yeah.
why are
It's
companies not
all
jumping
about,
on the boat?
it's kind of like, you look at anything that you filter. You could water, wine, pick your, thing that's filtered.
Yeah.
And I look at it as just like a filtering system. And now with AI, what we've got at that level is another filtering system. Could we use it that it does like a basic level of research? And then I think of, even 5 years ago, like unmoderated research was considered like, oh, that's not very that. Could the AI then go to an unmoderated research? Do we even need unmoderated research anymore if it's AI moderated? And then we go into picking out of, an AI could probably do like 100 studies in a very short amount of time for almost no money. And then the next level is, what are the findings? Now let's go and do 5 really well thought out in-person interviews and see what we validate. So for me, there's like no risk in that, because there is still that checking, that human in the loop to kind of check. But then the next thing is, very, very commonly, with lots of people doing research across the organization, you'll have new people coming in, product managers or designers who might not have done much research prior to being in the organization. Now they're there and it's like, oh, I've got to now learn how to do research, or I've got to do something I've never done before. I've done all these kinds of research, but not this thing. And so they'll very often be tapping on the shoulder of a researcher to get mentorship all the way through, to build confidence that they've got the right plan, they're going in the right direction, and their discussion guide is good, for instance, and they're choosing the right cohort. Imagine if we had a well-trained AI that could take that person through that mentorship process, and they could, because it's an AI, you would feel quite free with like, I'm just going to show you my thing and we can kind of get it in shape. And then at some point, the PM, designer, whoever goes, the engineer goes, actually, I think I've got something pretty good here. AI, and we're happy with this. And then take it to the research and tap them on the shoulder and can you do a final pass over this? Now you've just cut down hours of a researcher's time in doing all this work and the confidence building needed down to maybe half an hour, 15 minutes.
Yes.
So again, it's like when you start to see it as an intelligence as opposed to an application, it can be diffuse across the research workflow, across even the product development life cycle, where research fits into that, and supporting and feeding people doing the work of research and learning all the way through, which I think is radically exciting.
I personally think, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong with this, I personally think researchers are the ones in this design aspect. And again, I don't like to label them research and design together, but in the business context where they see us as one group.
Yeah,
I
UX.
personally think that this is just my opinion. I think a lot of the designers will kind of lose their jobs of executing UI, because a lot of it is going to be done by AI in general. You're seeing these applications pop up left, right, and center. Whereas I don't see that happening in research. I see it mainly enhancing the research process, not replacing the research process. So a lot of people are talking in the design field and LinkedIn that UX is, dead. UI design is dead. It's all going to be done by AI. But I never hear anything about research being dead. Never. And it then comes down to what you just mentioned. Like, do we need unmoderated testing? So I want to get your take on this. Do you think there's going to be a reshift in the methodologies that researchers do, especially people coming into this field now and coming out in the next 2 to 3 years. Do you think we're going to reshift our methodologies that we bring into businesses because of AI coming into it?
I feel like I'm pausing to think on this because it is future visioning, and we're in kind of the world of flux right now as to like where does everything land. I think a lot of the methodologies that researchers use, like longitudinal studies, diary studies, I think surveys will still exist. I think a lot of the methodologies themselves will still exist. What I think will change is how researchers exist within the organization.
Yes.
Even like put aside
Okay.
the researchers as people, like
Yeah.
how research itself exists across an organization. I think that is shifting, and I think it has to shift. And I think this is where operations has been on a journey, research operations has been on a journey where initially it was like, oh, great, we have got people to administrate our lives like Uber for research. They're going to come in and just make everything easier for researchers to do more research. I myself stood on a stage in 2018 and said, research operations is here to make researchers' lives easier. And I realized pretty soon after, actually, no, like we will be laid off. We're not delivering business value just by making researchers' lives easier, because researchers are expensive. And if we're just making their lives better, we just make research even more expensive. We don't necessarily deliver more value to the business. And that's when I woke up and thought, we'd better start setting up systems that enable others to do research. And that's one of the reasons that at the Atlassian Research Ops team, at the round of first layoffs was really just about unscathed, because we were serving 500, 600 people across the organization as a dinky team of 10.
Wow.
And doing it was like mass catering, basically, a pretty good job. You weren't getting cordon bleu, like Michelin star restaurant deal. You were getting McDonald's, but like satisfying enough, right?
Yeah.
And then at some point I realized, but you know what? Like if we really want to if research operations is going to really set the bar for value, it's not at all about helping researchers have a nicer life, helping others do research more easily. Yes, that's one part, but we have to make sure that insights are getting into the brains and the central nervous systems of the people who need to make decisions. That is our number one goal. So going back to the future of research and AI and all that kind of jazz, what researchers and research operations need to do is you need an operations person, because we're systems designers, we're operators, we get stuff going. We need to have the research leader there, because they know, when do we do diary studies? When do we do AI level, sort of AI moderated research? When do we do unmoderated? When do we do whatever other longitudinal studies? Like all these different words that for many people are like, wow, I mean, that's like a word salad right there. I don't know what you mean. They come in and they decide, when does what happen? They define the specs, the specifications for the engine that we're going to build. And operations come in, they're like, yeah, okay, we're going to build this engine this way and get it working this way so it scales, so that it's sustainable, so there's all these amazing things. This is what we need to do that. When we get that partnership going, I think that research, if it's designed, it must be designed in cohesion with how product or service is delivered out to customers.
Yeah.
I think it is a powerhouse, right? But where we are is we were just this like team, the siloed little team in companies, almost like an organ. Like if you think of a body, I'm taking everybody's brains now into like, think of a body. And say like product was I'm making this up as we go along, but say product was the heart, and say design, so let's say design was the heart, because it's like that feeling stuff. And, like product was the lungs and research was the liver, for instance. Like all these separate bits connected by all the circulatory system and everything, but connected, but all separate. And I think research really needs to work on becoming the spine.
Wow.
Because we should be getting, we should be sending signals up to the brain and to all the parts of the body to tell them what to do, because we are knowledge. And research operations needs to make that happen. That's where we need to go. And the new intelligence of AI, the new team member that we have that is ultra cheap for what we're getting.
Yeah.
Like what an awesome opportunity to think about, wow, we've just got like the ability to have so many more team members doing things, but this team member's not that good at this right now. It's great at this though. Like, no human being on earth can do everything. And when anyone onboards a human being into their team, a good manager goes, where are your strengths? I'm also not going to expect that you do everything on day one. I know that you're probably going to take 3 months to learn the ropes, but then you're going to be stupendous. And we need to look at AI the same way.
You just hit so many nails on the head from that answer. And the one thing there's many things I'm going to dissect from that, but one statement you just made was you showed your value at, and we'll probably have to bleep this out when we say it, but you showed your value at that scene. With such a small team, you were able to help 600 people or the whole organization. And I think that speaks in itself, isn't it? That you don't need large research teams. You just need a small team who's delivering value, and as you mentioned, is sharing out that information to be ingested or digested from your, from a research perspective, to really show that they are bringing a lot of value to the company. So I love that. I really love that answer, because I personally think I would love to see research in such a higher strategic role, even though I'm a DesignOps expert or professional. I personally think that if you move that research into that more strategic level, I think a lot of companies, and I hope a lot of companies over the next couple of years start to do this, they will start to see a lot of great impact that a research team can do, and not be tied into just speaking to customers and doing usability tests. I think, we're at a stage where, as you mentioned, with AI coming in as a team member, this is the opportunity for research to now move to that higher level. So
You're making me think of something. So, one of the things that I sometimes hear is like, yes, we need to go to the higher level. Let's just take the elevator up to the 12th floor and just stay there with the C-suite. That's where we want to be. But if you think, going back to the analogy of the human or any mammal's body, the nervous system isn't just in the head. It would know nothing if it was just in the head. Instead, it's gotten the nerves spread all over. So my hands are really sensitive. I can get a lot of information. My eyes are like seeing things. My ears are picking up on all the signal is then being picked up around my body and sent to the brain. So, the way I see with research operations and the absolute lockstep relationship it should have with a research leader, it doesn't have to be a whole team of researchers, just a research strategist in the room, is how do we set up the systems that enable us to have tentacles, to have feelers out all over the organization that we can then be bringing and centralizing like a spine and digesting and working into information that can then be translated in the brains of the people who are making the decisions all the way through the levels of the organization, so that they have an insight, right?
Yeah.
And they can make a smart decision.
Kate, what would you say to somebody who's listening to this podcast right now? And I wanted to end it up with this question due to the fact that, say they're trying to influence the right people to change the culture where research can be positioned. What would be your best advice for them to influence the benefits of what a research team can do to that person from your perspective?
Yeah. It's actually a quote that I have in my book, but it's come up a couple of times this week, and it's by Desmond Tutu, the now late Archbishop of South Africa. And he said, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It is a very, very big deal to change someone's mind about something. So the number one thing is it takes time, just to acknowledge that right at the start, that you don't necessarily change someone's mind overnight unless you've got a gun to their head. Sometimes that might be the case. but there's no need for that. It's also one bite at a time. Like people are in the world that we live in right now, everybody's overwhelmed. There is so much going on. There's so much information. There's such an enormous amount going on in professional, personal, everywhere, that you are not going to change people's minds by overloading them with more words, new jargon, new information. And so my best advice is to pick a thing. Like, go back to the basics. Find what is again, going back to that book, the book that you had, what was it? The Idiots Around the
Surrounded by the Idiots.
Surrounded by Idiots. Exactly. Good.
Post.
Go back to, are they a red person, a yellow person? Who are they? Use your research skills to kind of try and understand them. Ask the questions. Observe. Where are they putting their money? Wherever someone puts their money is where their priorities are. If they're putting their money into dark mode, accessibility, I don't know, pick your feature in the world that you're working in. Go and pay attention to that, because they're more likely to pay attention to the thing they're already paying attention to. And if you can align yourself with the thing that they're already paying attention to, and go, a perfect example is a library, a research library. It's an amazing thing to build. But most people build a library and they just throw everything in there about everything.
Yes.
And you get this kind of like thin layer of knowledge about everything. And it's not really satisfying for anything necessarily. It's difficult. It takes time to build it up to the point where it's actually satisfying for anyone, for anything.
Yes.
But let's just stick with dark mode as a very basic example. Say this person you want to get on board they've put their money on dark mode. We need dark mode. I'm sure everybody's got that by now, but let's stick with this. Build a library as one example of something you might do, and fill it with amazing internal and external research about dark mode. So their obsession is that thing, and they go to your library, and it's this unbelievable celebration of dark mode.
Yeah.
You're going to get them on side because you've played to where their interests are already. And you've created something that does a deep dive. Now, they might move on to something else and go, wow, that's really amazing. I love that. Can you do that for my new obsession? I've just put all my money on, I don't know, going to the moon.
Yeah.
you then create another pillar of knowledge within your library that is to that. And so you can extrapolate this across all of the various elements of research ops, recruitment, build an amazing population around dark mode, build an amazing population around going to the moon or eating eggs for breakfast or whatever the obsession is. And in that way, you'll continue to get buy-in and enthusiasm around your thing.
I love that one. I really do. Research repos, in my opinion, I'm going to have somebody come on the show about this, because I think a lot of repos, and you call it libraries as well, I think they fall off the bandwagon due to the fact, and this just from my experience, I think what happens is people just throw in so much information in there.
Yeah.
It's like a needle in a haystack to find what is going to be relevant as well as what is going to be impactful. So I really think the art of building a good repo, it is a massive art in itself, because you need to make sure that whoever's going to there, that they can find the right information, that they can access the data that's needed. And there are tools out there that really help. I think there's something like Marvin, which is really, really good, where it's really an AI that listens to all the research and you can ask it questions upon that. But that's another podcast in itself, because...
It is. I really want to add something in there, though, which I think is fascinating about the space, is because what I am seeing so far is that you'll have like this kind of notion of, well, we'll just throw everything in there and AI will sort it out. But I think that where you're going to get real value, and again, it goes back to the idea of treating AI as an intelligence, like another human or another like being, is that if you go, actually, well, if we have an AI that we really train up on going to the moon, it becomes expert on all of our content around going to the moon, and perhaps it even go out occasionally onto the web and scrape the web for content on going to the moon. And when we ask it a question about what do we know about going to the moon, but specifically XYZ, it is an expert. It has spent months training up on that thing. I think we're going to have a lot more juice squeezed out of our content, rather than just having that very flat generalist approach of, well, we're just going to build a repository or a library with everything in it, and then we're going to ask AI to just search through it all and give us amazing content. So I really am very pro for that really like structured approach to it. The other thing is someone was speaking to me earlier and saying, we've really got to figure out how we speak to our product, how we deliver insights to them that are meaningful. And I was saying, well, AI is like one thing it is extremely good at is you can train it up to be able to speak in certain tones of voice. Like, I would be worried if I was working in marketing right now because it's so good at it. Like in terms of content production, it's brilliant. And so why not train up the ideal program manager profile as one of your bots? And before you send your research report or your whatever asset you're creating as a researcher, put it into your program manager bot that is the perfect profile for that, and see, like, hey, bot, like that's trained up as program manager, does this speak to you? What is your response? How would you improve it so that it really speaks to you? Take it, look at it, and go, yeah, actually, it's pretty cool. I'm going to send it off. And so I think that we can have these synthetic teammates that we can hone what we're delivering before we're delivering it so that it has the impact we want.
Wow, you just scratched into the surface for another podcast. I would love to bring you back on that one.
Well, I have to.
Yeah, we have to talk about this again, Kate, because I think, it's moving so fast, and I definitely believe what you just said is going to happen. We are going to have more of these synthetic teammates, and we'd love to see how things have progressed in the year when we bring you, if you want to come onto our show next time.
Totally. I'd love that. Yeah, anytime. It'd be great.
Kate, you're going to be coming to Europe. I hope we can grab a coffee when you're in Switzerland. But would you like to tell the audience on your, I'm going to call her your world tour or European tour on what's coming up in the next couple of months?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a series of masterclasses called Scaling and Systematizing Research, not just for research operations professionals. It's for anyone who wants to scale insights in your organization. Feed the hungry people, the people who are hungry for knowledge and want to know how to build for the customers. How do you set up those structures? What is your strategy? Where do you even start? How do you bite off the elephant? Where, do you start the trunk or the tail? That's what we're going to work on. It's a one-day masterclass, but it involves also pre-work and coaching with me. It's I was going to say synthetic coaching, but it's not. It's asynchronous coaching. To get you to a point when you walk in on the day, you have a structure already in place that we can then build on and really kind of move within the one day. So it's really exciting. It includes lunch. It's in person, so like real people, which is very cool. So locations are Paris on the 5th of June. I had to unfortunately let Zurich go because there wasn't enough interest in Zurich itself.
Oh,
sadly.
no.
But Paris is looking great and going ahead. Might still pop through Zurich though, just to say hi.
Yeah, definitely. You have to.
We've got London sometime in, I think it's the 5th of July, actually, sometime in early July. And that's full, and well, not full yet, but there's a few places left on that one. And then Barcelona later in July, I think around the middle of July. And then finally, for those who are either traveling to Australia, to beautiful Sydney, where I live, I'll be running a masterclass in August in my hometown, which is a gorgeous beach town. Just a 20-minute ferry ride from the center of city CBD. So that's the world tour this year.
Wow, you are like a rock star. You're going to be touring, and then you're going to be traveling. So, everyone, we're going to be dropping the links to Kate's world tour in the show notes. So please, sign up. As mentioned, we'll try and get this podcast out as soon as possible before she does start traveling around the world. We do want to get her down to Zurich at one point. So, we're looking forward to that. And if anything has resonated with you today in what Kate and me have spoken about, please drop your comments down below. I will forward them over to Kate and let her answer directly to you. Again, if you want to get in touch with her, we'll also put her LinkedIn profile in the show notes. If that's okay, Kate.
That's totally fine. That's great. And if any viewers, listeners have got questions, I'll answer them via a video, like a short AMA video on my Substack.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Kate, I've been trying to get you on this show for a very long time, so go ahead.
I have been so impressed with your growth. It's been amazing. Huge congratulations.
Honestly, it really comes down to great guests like yourself who have come on. And I think we really done well with season 1 because it really does come down to it's the people that have come on the show and given a great talk. And I actually experienced it yesterday being on the other side, and it's really hard to be on that side. I'm like, oh wow. And for all of you who come onto this show, and this is a message to all the guests that come on the show, how you articulate your answers and really give the show so much information is an art in itself. So the thanks goes to you and all the guests that come on.
Thank you, Naresh. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to this, Kate. I'm looking forward to when the team pushes out. And yeah, I can't thank you enough for coming onto the show.
Really, it's been my joy and pleasure. So let's do it in 12 months' time when we know more about where AI and research is.
Definitely. And we're going to put this blooper of Kate singing in the beginning of it. So keep an eye out for that one as well.
One time only.
Yeah, it's an exclusive thing. So thank you, Kate.
Thank you so much. Let me think. Riders in the storm. If I go for Jim Morrison, right? The Doors. Who knows why that is the song that jumped to mind?